Newly arrived in Yamu, our boy wasn't looking to start trouble, but if someone handed it to him, he sure wasn't the type to swallow it. Milton clearly crossed the line, so he made sure the guy got a proper lesson. With that matter settled, he casually left the store. The buzz outside had already snowballed, and people were crowding in, with their phones and cameras out. Blending into the crowd, Lu Sheng smiled and remarked that he feels much better now. At the same time, he took off his disguise and pulled out his phone. Just as he expected, the internet had already exploded, and news about Milton was everywhere. He noted how the speed of gossip here in space beats Earth by a mile. Post after post popped up, and the headlines were downright savage. Count's son exposed for cruel fetish, followed by a pitiful little piglet in the thumbnail with comment sections that were flooded with girls calling to protect their pets from creeps like him. As for our boy, this kind of revenge was far more satisfying than a simple beatdown. With a carefree hum, he strolled off. A few days later, he was already on his way to Celestial Academy with Far, where he explained that the academy was the top-tier academy in the entire star sector, open only to the most gifted talents. Once admitted, students enjoyed the absolute best resources, treatment, and martial legacies available. He declared that, status-wise, graduates were on par with nobles holding Viscount titles. And that wasn't an exaggeration, because Far emphasized that even the weakest graduates were some of the most powerful 11th level. Lu Sheng, clearly intrigued, asked if Far himself had attended the academy. Far shook his head with a hint of regret, admitting he hadn't made the cut. His talent hadn't measured up. However, he added that the current chief executor, Lord Andre, had graduated from there and was already a 12th level at just 5,000 years old. Still, Far was confident with Lu Sheng's potential. He asserted there'd be no issue passing the entrance tests, and if Lu Sheng really impressed them, he might even get the chance to step into the main Celestial Academy. As Far kept talking, he became more serious and explained that the Celestial Academy's headquarters were where true monsters gathered. He called it the battlefield of prodigies from every race across the galaxy, where regular prodigies were crushed to dust without even leaving a trace. He remarked that the Yamu sector was laughably small by comparison. Almost pitiful, really. Lu Sheng couldn't help but mutter that if this place was considered small, meanwhile, he couldn't even afford a basic shuttle for travel within the sector. Far went on to explain that the academy usually only opened its doors once every 1,000 years, and last recruitment had been 3 centuries ago, which meant Lu Sheng should have been looking at a 700-year wait. But fate had thrown them a bone this time, and he further explained it's all because of a big shot who decided to get his bloodline tested, creating this rare testing opportunity, and others nearby got to tag along for the ride. As long as they passed the qualification test, they could be admitted early. That got Lu Sheng's attention, and it got him wondering who had the kind of clout to make that happen. Far said the guy's name is Lancer, son of the Marquis Lano. Their family was backed by a 13th level whose reputation spanned 10 whole star sectors. Far further explained that Lancer's family has the tradition of returning to Yamu to participate in the testing, and last time, Lancer's extraordinary lifeform was already Moonlight level, and Far can only assume he'd get a much higher level this time. Lu Sheng was genuinely surprised to hear you could keep evolving like that. Far clarified that it wasn't easy, but with enough effort, a 13th level could reshape their descendants' genes to echo their own talents. Essentially, gene editing. Lu Sheng found it a bit unfair, noting to himself how wild it was that you could basically remodel your kids for greatness. But it's not without limits, and Far admitted that theoretically the enhanced children could only reach about 70% of the parents' talent, and realistically, getting to even half was impressive. He emphasized how rare and mysterious an extraordinary lifeform truly was. That's why someone like our boy, born with such a gift, was so valuable. In fact, Far boldly claimed that once the tests were over, noble families would be lining up to send their daughters his way. Lu Sheng brushed it off with a laugh, joking that if Far had a daughter, maybe, just maybe, he'd think about it, considering their friendship. But Far took it seriously, declaring that he had a whole bunch of kids and looked visibly thrilled. That left Lu Sheng awkwardly scratching his head, wondering if aliens just didn't understand politely refusing someone. Not wanting to cause any more confusion, he quickly clarified that it was a joke, and Far knew he was already married. Far, however, just waved it off. To him, someone at Lu Sheng's level should never settle for one spouse. He claimed it was only natural for many women to desire his seed, saying it with a straight face, as if it were the most normal thing. Lu Sheng nearly choked from second-hand embarrassment, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, remarking that Far really had no filter. Far then pulls out a tablet and asks Lu Sheng if he's seen this guy before. It's a wanted poster. Our boy replies, "No idea who that is." But in his head, he thinks that he not only changed his appearance, but he even used psychic energy to alter people's memories just in case. Still, he thought that the poster looks ugly AF. Far went on to say the guy was being hunted by the Sith family, apparently because Milton got publicly humiliated thanks to him. Far clearly picked up on the vibe from our boy and figured the two had some history, but didn't really care. He joked that once Lu Sheng's talent got revealed, even the Siths would be tripping over themselves trying to marry off their daughters to him. Anyway, while they were chatting, their ship finally touched down. They walked over to this massive window, and right in front of them was this towering gate. And turns out, that will be the last line of defense when Yamu sector gets hit by beast invasions. But what really caught the eye was this giant, floating structure way off in the distance. Far explained it was called the Celestial Fate Wheel. It's this ancient device that reads your bloodline and tells how powerful your physique really is. And he notes from legends that if someone with an immortal bloodline ever activated it, all the orbs on the dial would light up, shaking the stars and triggering some kind of phenomenon. Lu Sheng was curious what kind of event that might be, but even Far admitted he didn't know because the thing had never been fully activated in the entire recorded history of the sector. So their ship lands, and they keep walking until they spot this old guy standing there with a staff, and you can probably tell he's very strong. Far explained that this was the Dean himself, one of the strongest people in the entire region. Lu Sheng notes the guy had the same kind of pressure he once felt from Charus, and says this guy was the real deal. Probably a solid 12th level, and clearly the one running the show today. Not long after, an even bigger, fancier ship rolled in. Far said, "Yep, that's the one," and from the sky, down came a young man with his bodyguard. This was Lancer, son of the Marquis everyone had been talking about. But Lu Sheng didn't care much about Lancer. What caught his eye was the bodyguard behind him. He could tell the guy was easily just as strong as the Dean, which made Lu Sheng think, if someone got a 12th level acting as their security, that's some strong background. Lancer, meanwhile, walked up, greeted the Dean, and said his dad sent his regards. The Dean smiled, returned the greeting, but also casually mentioned that the test today wasn't just for him. Lancer asked if there was someone else here worth the attention. The Dean didn't say much, just smiled and said, "Let's get started." Then he lifted his staff and announced the start of the once-in-a-thousand-years celestial fate testing. That alone got everyone excited. Meanwhile, the Dean just stood back, stroking his beard while looking at Lu Sheng, remarking to himself that this is the prodigy the chief executor had told him about. The first candidate was a baldy who built like a tank. Behind him, a baron was barking orders, telling him to focus and not screw it up. The guy nodded, all fired up, promising he wouldn't disappoint. The baron sweetened the deal and tells him that if he did well, not only would he win his freedom, he'd be made a real noble. At the same time, our boy saw the tattoo on the man's neck. Far picked up on it and casually explained. This was more common than people like to admit. After 11th level, most noble families hit a wall, and to keep their titles intact, they scrambled to gather martial talent however they could, through bribery, threats, even snatching promising kids from the slave market. Far remarked that not everyone had the luxury of controlling their fate, like Lu Sheng, and the nobles would do anything to tie down a strong fighter if it meant keeping their family name afloat. Lu Sheng wondered why they didn't just train people on their own territory. Far scoffed and said that was a pipe dream. Expecting a small place to produce a top-tier prodigy was like banking on a lottery win. Then, after a beat, he thought to himself, realizing that's exactly what had happened with Lu Sheng. He'd basically hit the jackpot by stumbling across him back on White Mist sector. Meanwhile, the baldy was ready. He sliced his palm, letting his blood drip down. Energy began to gather in his hands as he touched the wheel. A faint star flickered to life, but he was confused about what to do next. The Baron was already fuming, stomping and yelling at him to stop standing there like an idiot and push harder. The guy gritted his teeth, adjusted his stance, and shoved with everything he had. Veins bulged, but the wheel didn't even budge. Meanwhile, the crowd stared, but still no movement. In frustration, the man roared and summoned his martial avatar, stretching 7,000 meters tall. Far noted that even the AG avatar was only 8,000 meters, so this guy wasn't half bad. Still, it wasn't enough to make anyone impressed. Finally, the first star lit up in full. The Baron cheered, then another lit up soon after, but he had reached his limit and collapsed from exhaustion. Our boy noted how just pushing the wheel was enough to drain a 9th level dry, and this was getting quite interesting. The dean stepped forward and calmly announced the result, saying that a 2-star extraordinary life form was not good enough for admission. The man trembled in place, feeling crushed. Meanwhile, the Baron had his guards drag the man off and called Baldy garbage. More people stepped up after that, one after another. Lu Sheng didn't bother rushing in. He quietly observed, occasionally asking Far a few things. In no time, he pieced together the grading system. The moment your blood touched the wheel, your level was confirmed. White glow meant basic extraordinary. Blue glow meant morning star level. Yellow meant moonlight. And red was apparently sunlight. So far, nobody had lit up anything past morning star. Some collapsed from sheer exhaustion. A few cheered after getting their star ratings. But even those who barely hit morning star didn't make the cut. Up next was a man with blue hair. He poured every ounce of strength into the push. Powerful energy spread outwards, and suddenly several stars flared to life in an instant. For the first time that day, the dean actually showed a reaction. Then he announced morning star level with 7 stars. Admitted. The crowd was shocked because this was the first time anyone had passed. That's when an old man came strutting over, laughing like he'd just won the lottery. He praised the guy, and we were told his name was Pharaoh, saying he always knew the kid had it in him. Beside him stood a girl, and the old man, grinning ear to ear, declared that no one could stop Pharaoh and Lilith from being together anymore. He even told his daughter they'd be holding the wedding immediately so she could finally reunite with her husband. Lilith, clearly flustered, shyly walked up to Pharaoh, wanting to apologize for how things had gone before. But Pharaoh didn't even look at her. Cold and firm, he told the Viscount there was no need to say anything, adding that it was too late and he and Lilith weren't a good match. This caused both of them to freeze. Then Pharaoh let out a faint snort and walked off without another word. Lilith stood there in shock, tears forming in her eyes, completely lost. Then, in a burst of anger, she turned on her father, blaming him for everything. If he hadn't stood in their way back then, none of this would have happened. Far, watching the scene unfold, gave a knowing smirk. He'd seen this plotline play out more times than he could count. He remarked that it was the classic, "You looked down on me back then, but now you can't even reach me." Then he gave Lu Sheng a bit of insight, saying that's the risk nobles take when they try to grow talent inside their own territories. You pour time, money, and effort into someone, and the moment they succeed, they flip the script and cut ties. Because in the end, nurturing someone isn't just about talent. It's about character, too. Lu Sheng nodded and added that the guy clearly treated his daughter like a bargaining chip, tossing her around like a poker bet. No surprise that things ended up so poorly. Then, half-jokingly, he asked Far what he thought of his character. Far threw an arm over Lu Sheng's shoulder and laughed, saying that anyone who still made time to chat with their family across galaxies every day couldn't possibly be a bad person. Next up was Lancer, and Far leaned in, declaring this was what the whole test had been leading to. Lancer stepped forward calmly, with the dean telling him to give it everything he had, and Lancer replied that he would. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes. Energy began to surge around him. When he opened them again, a third eye on his forehead snapped open. And just like that, everything changed. His aura instantly grew overwhelming. The entire crowd fell silent, and everyone was watching him. This was the air of a 13th-level marquis, and everyone wanted to see just how powerful he really was. The wheel lit up yellow this time, and someone in the crowd shouted out, recognizing it as moonlight level. Even the dean was impressed. But Lancer wasn't done. He summoned his martial avatar, and the thing kept growing, bigger and bigger until it towered over the wheel itself. Far, meanwhile, was shocked to see the guy's martial avatar was a stunning 50,000 meter tall.